Hello, welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Well, today's chapters are Psalm 81 and 82. I'm down here in the Western Cape, down at Sea Point, and today's chapters are looking at the subject of worship and idolatry. It's a beautiful place to worship down here at the beach, and idolatry is something that we see very commonplace in the Western world today. So 81 says, "Sing for joy to God our strength." One of the reasons we worship is because God strengthens us and He empowers us. And then He starts very lavishly. Begin the music. Strike the timbrel. Play the melodious harp and the lyre. Sound the ram's horn. And He's basically saying, because when God went out against Egypt, He removed the burden from our shoulders. Their hands were set free from the basket. In other words, God set us free. That's a good reason to worship. And then He says, verse 11, "But my people would not listen to me. Israel would not submit to me. So I gave them over to their stubborn hearts to follow their own desires." This is what we call God's passive judgment. If you turn your back on God, even though He set you free and even though He's empowered you, if you turn your back on God, what He does is He hands you over to yourself. He hands you over to your own sinful desires, Romans tells us. And so you get given over to the consequence of your defiance of God. And that's judgment in itself, actually. But He says, this is how the psalm ends, "If my people will only listen to me, I would subdue their enemies and I would feed them with the finest of honey and wheat, and I would nourish them." And so the psalmist basically kicks off by saying, worship God, He set you free. If you turn your back on Him, He's going to hand you over to yourself. That's not going to look pretty. Turn back to Him. And as you turn back to Him, He will sustain you, and He will feed you, and He will nourish you. Now, Psalm 82 is a reflection on idolatry. What's an idol? An idol is anything that you are putting your hope in to save you, to rescue you, to give you identity, to give you meaning. If there's anything other than Jesus that fulfills that role, the Bible describes that as an idol. Now that can be a person, that can be, in India, Sachin Tendulkar, the famous cricketer, is described as like a god to some people. I mean, all they think about is cricketers. All they think about. So idols can be human beings. They can be absolutely anything. It can be money. It can be anything you put your faith in, your trust in, to give you meaning and to give you hope in life. So God says, so this psalmist says God presides over all the gods. And then further down in verse 6 it says, "Your gods will die among you." So Luke asked the question, he says, I thought these were idols that it was speaking about. If it's idols, how can idols be dying? Idols don't live. Exactly, idols don't live. That's the point of the song. Whether you make your idol a person, or whether you make your idol an institution, or whether you make your idol an ideology, all those are presided over by God, and they will all vanquish, they will all disappear, they will all be destroyed in the process of time. And so the psalmist ends and says, "Rise up, O God, judge the earth, for all the nations are your inheritance." This psalm, it's a very short psalm. It essentially saying, God is God over all. No matter what God you put in place, whether it's a human, whether it's an ideology, whether it's a place, whether it's a mode of living, whatever that idol is, it's eventually going to die and disappear. It's worth only trusting Jesus, trusting God Himself.